Today, we're talking and baking Christmas cookies. I've taken 3 of our family's favorite Christmas cookies and I've reduced each recipe down to make one single large cookie. It's a perfect way to enjoy a little holiday baking without ending up with too many cookies. We're making chocolate crinkles, ginger snaps, and my personal favorite, white chocolate peppermint cookies. Join me in the kitchen as we make small batch recipes with big taste. So you have been loving all my giant cookie recipes here on YouTube, so I decided we needed to make some Christmas giant cookies. Now, of course, if you want to be able to share these cookies with someone else, you could take that one giant cookie and instead make 4 smaller cookies. But giant cookies are a lot more fun. All right, so our cookie starts with a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. We're going to use 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. And we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of vegetable or canola oil. Just use some mild flavored oil. And this is what helps give this cookie its fudgy brownie-like consistency. So use oil, not butter. Going to mix that all up. And then we're going to add in 1 whole egg. All right, then we're going to add in our dry ingredients, which is a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour and a 1/4 cup of baking cocoa. We're going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. Off of there. And then 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. We'll mix that all together. Now, if you want, at this point, if you want even more chocolate in your chocolate crinkle cookie, you could add in about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of chocolate chips. All right, so this is a really wet cookie dough. So at this point, you're going to want to throw it into either the refrigerator or I like to speed up the process. I put it into my freezer and then I clean up. By the time my oven's preheated, I can pull it out and it's still going to be a little sticky and gooey, but we can still bake our cookie. All right, so I got a little distracted, left my cookie dough in the freezer for about 30 minutes. It's still pretty sticky, but it's definitely, we can get it scooped up and onto our cookie sheet. If you leave it in longer, it'll get firmer. And so we're just gonna plop it onto our cookie sheet. There we go. Now, when you're making these, if you're going to make them into 4 smaller cookies, use a cookie scoop, and then you can kind of roll them in powdered sugar. But with this bigger one, we're just going to dust it with powdered sugar. Now the sugar, what the sugar does, this is what makes your cookie crackle. Because the sugar draws out some of the moisture from the surface of the cookie, but it leaves the under, side nice and moist and gooey. But drawing out that moisture causes the cookie to crackle or crinkle. So we're going to put it in the oven, 350 degrees for about 10 to 12 minutes and watch our cookie crackle. Our next cookie is a slightly dressed up version of a Gingersnap cookie. It's another traditional Christmas cookie. We're going to add in some toffee bits to get an extra little bit of crunch. Now, a Gingersnap cookie is called a Gingersnap because it's traditionally a crisper cookie that snaps when you break it. Well, my version today isn't quite as snappy, but it is a soft, chewy Gingersnap cookie. All right, we're going to begin with 2 tablespoons of softened butter. And I always just like to take the back of my spoon because we mix these small batch recipes up by hand and just smash that butter a bit. It makes it easier to incorporate all the ingredients together. We're going to add in 1/3 of a cup of granulated sugar, and we're going to add in some molasses. Now, molasses is one of the key ingredients to a Gingersnap cookie. It's what gives it that deep, rich flavor. Did I say molasses? I said molasses. Molasses, right here. You'll usually find this in the baking aisle near the Caro syrup and the honey and that type of thing. So we're going to add in 1 tablespoon of molasses. It's nice and thick and dark, and it smells so good. And then we're going to add in 1 tablespoon of beaten egg. Again, not a whole egg, just I beat up the egg, measure out 1 tablespoon. And then if you have a leftover egg, you can try some of those other giant cookie recipes up there, or just freeze it in an ice cube tray and save it for later when you're going to do some more baking. All All right, next we'll add in our dry ingredients. We are going to use a half of a cup of all-purpose flour. Use a quarter teaspoon of, no, half a teaspoon. Good thing for my trusty assistant there, of baking soda. And then we have a quarter teaspoon. These are two other really important ingredients to a ginger snap cookie is cinnamon and dried ginger. And we've got a quarter teaspoon of each one. And then we're going to add in just an eighth of a teaspoon of salt. Now, if you're using unsalted butter, I always use salted butter, but if you're using unsalted, just add in a little bit more salt. Mix that all up, and then you could bake it ready to go just like this, but if you want to add a little extra fancy to it, a little extra crunch, I'm going to add in a quarter of a cup of toffee bits. And then just mix it all together till all the dry ingredients are incorporated. Now, with these small batch recipes, since we're not using a mixer, sometimes I just get my hand in here to help bring the dough together. So I've got my dough into a ball. Now, if you haven't added in the toffee bits, if you want, a lot of times a traditional ginger snap will have some coarse sugar on top. You could totally just sprinkle some of that on before you put it in the oven. But I'm just going to put it on my parchment lined paper, and this one I'm going to push down. Now this cookie, unlike the chocolate crinkle cookie, this one is going to spread. So I only push it down to about 3.5 inches around because it's going to spread as it bakes. And it's at this point, if you wanted to put some coarse sugar on it, you could just sprinkle it right on top. And then we're going to bake this cookie in a 375-degree Fahrenheit oven for how long? About 11 to 12 minutes. All right, next cookie is my favorite holiday cookie and my favorite Christmas flavor combination, white chocolate and peppermint. So we're going to start this cookie with 2 tablespoons of softened butter. And again, we're just going to smash that butter up a little bit. We're going to add in 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Get that all mixed in with our butter. With these small batch recipes, as always, you want to make sure that you're measuring nice and accurately because a little too much or a little not enough of something can make a big difference in a small batch recipe. And then we are going to add in a tablespoon of beaten egg. Again, this isn't a whole egg. It's not a whole egg yolk. I beat up the egg and measure out a tablespoon. There we go. Your cookie will taste way too eggy if you end up putting in a whole egg into it. And then we're going to add in our extracts to this. This gives the cookie some extra peppermint punch. We're going to use a quarter teaspoon of vanilla and also a quarter teaspoon of peppermint. Now, peppermint extract is not the same thing as mint extract, okay? They are 2 different flavors. And for this one, you really want peppermint extract. I did a quarter teaspoon of that. Good there. I like lots of peppermint. And then combine that together. Okay, next for our dry ingredients, we're going to use a half of a cup of all-purpose flour and then just 1 extra tablespoon. And when I measure my flour, I always like to scoop and then scrape. Then we're going to add in an eighth of a teaspoon of baking soda and a nice healthy pinch of salt. And combine our dry ingredients in. All right, and then before I get all the dry ingredients totally mixed in, I like to add in my other things so you're not over mixing your cookies, especially with small batch recipes. You don't want to over mix them. So I have a quarter cup of white chocolate chips and a quarter cup of, these are peppermint baking chips. You can usually find them at Christmas. If you can't find them, you could also use crushed candy cane. Works just great too. But these are these Andes peppermint baking chips. And combine all that in. All right, we've got the cookie dough all mixed together. And again, a lot of times I end up using my hands a little bit just to help bring it all together. And we're going to take a parchment lined baking sheet. We're going to put our dough on there. And again, we're going to push it down to about 3.5 inch size because this one will also spread. And then I like to take a little bit of extra crushed candy cane or those baking chips and just sprinkle them on top. Makes it look a little prettier and it just gives it more yummy peppermint flavor. All right, this one's ready to go into our oven at 350 degrees for about how long? 12 to 15 minutes. So. All right, our Christmas cookies are done. We have our yummy, chewy Gingersnap cookie, our white chocolate peppermint, and our chocolate crinkle cookie, which is more like a brownie than a cookie. So fudgy inside. So I hope you'll give them a try, and I'll see you in the next video.